All right, you know the drill. We've got a topic that's just exploded onto the scene, a pile of sources overflowing with details. And our mission is to cut through it all and give you the crucial insights.
Yeah.
And today, it's the Nintendo Switch 2 launch. It's official, it's real, and people are finally getting their hands on it.
After years of speculation, leaks, and maybe a little denial, it feels a bit surreal that it's actually here.
Totally. And because of that kind of sudden, truncated reveal, followed by reviewers getting units right before launch day, we're seeing this flood of information hit all at once as people really dig in. So using this stack of fresh articles, hands-on accounts from gaming publications, YouTube channels, everyone who's been putting it through its paces, we're here to make sense of it for you. What's new? What matters? What does this thing actually do? Let's dive deep into it.
Let's unpack what the first few days have shown us.
So just getting to launch day felt like a weird journey, right? Years of silence, rumors, and then suddenly, boom, it's announced and released in a relatively short window.
It was definitely an unusual cycle. That long period of zero official acknowledgement created a lot of noise, and then the actual marketing lead-up was very brief.
Which explains why a lot of those in-depth reviews you might have been looking for felt delayed. Many reviewers were only getting hardware maybe, 24 hours before launch?
Exactly. And on top of that, reports confirmed there's a required day one system update.
Oh, okay.
Critical functionality reportedly isn't live until that's downloaded and installed, meaning you need an internet connection straight away. You just hope Nintendo's servers were ready for that global rush.
Right, that's always the potential bottleneck. And stock seems, typical Nintendo launch. Some retailers, like their own store, and very sold out fast.
Yeah.
But others apparently still had stock even after launch day, sometimes with options like monthly payment plans, like that Mario Kart World Bundle EE was offering.
It's a mixed picture, but it definitely reflects the pent-up demand after the Switch's success and that long wait for the successor.
Okay, once you've got it and you're through the setup, what's powering this thing? We know it's a custom NVIDIA chip.
Correct. And the immediate question is always, how powerful is it compared to the landscape today?
Right.
The key takeaway right up front is, in terms of raw horsepower, it is less powerful than the PS5 and Xbox Series XS.
So not a teraflop monster then,
Yep.
But that's not the whole story for Nintendo, is it? This is where they leverage something clever, particularly NVIDIA's DLSS.
This is arguably the biggest game changer for the Switch 2's capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
DLSS, Deep Learning Supersampling. It's an AI upscaling technology.
Okay.
Instead of the chip rendering every single pixel of a high-resolution image, it can render the game at a much lower resolution, maybe 480p, 720p.
Wow.
And then uses sophisticated AI algorithms to intelligently reconstruct and upscale that image to the target display resolution, whether that's 1080p in handheld or 4K docked.
So it's doing less heavy lifting with the initial render, and AI is filling in the detail to make it look like a higher resolution image.
Precisely. It's how Nintendo is bridging that raw power gap. It allows for more complex graphics, higher frame rates, and targeting those higher resolutions without needing, full-fat console-level silicon power.
Right.
But you're right, it means when you hear 4K on Switch 2, it's generally not native 4K.
Got it. And what about memory? Because that often impacts what you can do with the power.
The Switch 2 has 12 GBs of RAM. This is interesting because that's actually more than the Xbox Series S's 10 GB.
Oh, okay.
That extra RAM capacity is crucial for handling those higher resolutions, particularly for keeping texture quality high even when upscaling the image.
That's a really insightful point. So while the core graphics horsepower might be less than the big consoles, having more RAM than a Series S helps it handle the demands of modern games that use high-resolution assets, especially when targeting upscaled resolutions.
Exactly. And it influences the type of performance targets they can aim for. PS5 and Series X often target native 4K at 60 fps, or even 120 Hz modes. The Switch 2, in handheld, aims for 1080p. Docked, it can aim for up to 4K at 60 Hz in supported games, likely using DLSS. But you'll also see performance modes here, perhaps targeting higher frame rates like 1080p at 120 Hz.
Okay.
Which some reports speculate could be the case for a game like Metroid Prime 4. Beyond.
The acid test everyone seemed to jump to was Cyberpunk 2077, running that on a portable Nintendo device. That's a statement.
It's an absolutely superb achievement. The fact that Cyberpunk 2077 runs on the Switch 2, even in handheld mode, is incredibly impressive.
And how does it actually run? Because runs can mean a lot of things.
Well, reports mention it has different modes similar to other consoles. A performance mode aiming for around 720p resolution, targeting 30-40 frames per second. And a quality mode aiming for 1080p but closer to 20-30 FPS.
Right.
Initial testing noted some minor visual compromises you'd expect, some DLSS ghosting around fine details, textures taking a second to fully load as you move around, and less sophisticated ray tracing compared to higher-end systems. But crucially, testers noted that motion was smooth with no jarring jutters. It felt playable.
That smooth motion point is key, right? It sounds like they've prioritized a consistent experience even with visual trade-offs, which is very Nintendo. And it's a stark contrast to how demanding that game is on, say, an Asus ROG Ally.
Oh, yeah?
Where without being plugged in, it reportedly struggles significantly to hit stable frames.
It really highlights the power of optimization and custom hardware. Building games specifically for this system, knowing its capabilities and leveraging DLSS, lets them punch far above their raw spec weight compared to less optimized PC handhelds running demanding titles.
Makes sense.
The fact that other demanding games like Elden Ring, Call of Duty, and Borderlands 4 are already confirmed or strongly rumored is concrete proof of this increased capability for major AAA third-party titles.
Okay, let's move from the engine to the windows, the display itself. In handheld mode, this is a significant upgrade, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're looking at a larger 7.9-inch LCD screen now with a 1080p resolution.
Okay.
That's a big step up from the original Switch's 6.2-inch and the OLED's 7-inch panels, which were both 720p.
And a faster refresh rate, too?
Yes, 120 hertz, double the previous models. It also supports HDR and is reported to be brighter.
Nice.
That combination of size, resolution, refresh rate, and brightness makes for a much more modern and detailed handheld experience.
But the OLED model of the original Switch had, well, an OLED screen. Going back to LCD, is that noticeable?
It is if you're coming from the OLED. Side-by-side comparisons, like with Pokemon Violet, do show the inherent advantages of OLED, deeper blacks, higher contrast, more vibrant colors.
Right, the pop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They can look slightly less saturated or poppy on the Switch 2's LCD. However, the Switch 2's LCD still has excellent color reproduction overall.
Good.
Early reports did note that HDR seemed to wash out some brighter scenes in initial testing, with some suggesting turning HDR off in game settings might actually look better for certain titles initially.
Interesting nuance there. What about when it's plugged into the dock?
When docked, the Switch 2 supports up to 4K resolution in supported games. This is a first for a Nintendo console.
Wow, okay.
It outputs via USB-C, which the dock converts to HDMI. It supports 4K at 60 Hz using HDMI 2.0.
Okay, 4K is in. What about VRR, variable refresh rate? That helps smooth out frame rate dips.
This is a bit of a quirk identified in early reports. VRR is only supported in handheld mode on the Switch 2 itself.
Oh, only handheld.
Yeah. When docked, the way the USB-C signal is converted to HDMI via DisplayPort seems to interfere with VRR output. It's possible this could be fixed later via software updates like Valve did with the Steam Deck's dock, or Sony eventually adding it to the PS5.
Maybe.
But for now, it's a handheld-only feature.
Mario Kart World was mentioned as looking great docked.
Yes. Reports specifically called out Mario Kart World looking incredibly sharp and detailed running in 4K docked. And it's not just new games. Games like the Link's Awakening remake and the upcoming Echoes of Wisdom are getting free updates, adding higher resolution and HDR support specifically for the Switch 2.
That's cool. Let's move on to how you actually hold and interact with it, the controllers and new features. The Joy-Con 2s are new.
They are. Physically, they're a bit taller than the original Joy-Cons and have a matte finish that feels much more sophisticated and less like, cheap plastic.
Okay.
A big change is the attachment system. It's now magnetic, offering a really satisfying snap when you slide them into place.
Magnetic attachment. Does that introduce any weirdness?
A little bit, yes. Testers noted that the magnets seem to allow you to attach the Joy-Cons backward or even upside down to the tablet, which is a peculiar quirk, but the solid click of them locking in is nice.
How do they feel to use for longer sessions?
Taller, but not significantly wider, so they're still quite slender compared to chunkier PC handheld grips. The thumbsticks are larger, with a smoother glide action and a padded outer ring, which testers felt made them feel more precise.
Okay.
The downside of the increased height is the plus buttons are now a stretch to reach comfortably. And the right thumbstick feels like more of a horizontal reach, which could be uncomfortable for smaller hands or extended playtime compared to something like the ROG Ally.
Gotcha. And the vibration has been upgraded. HD Rumble 2.
Yes, HD Rumble 2. They've put better vibration motors in, promising much higher resolution and texture to the haptic feedback, and they're quieter than the original. It's described as feeling more nuanced, and more nimble.
Hopefully developers use that more this time.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Now, one of the most discussed new features is definitely mouse control.
This is a unique one.
Yeah.
The Joy-Cons can be used as a mouse pointer. You can use them individually or together, and they function when detached from the tablet. Some PC games that are coming to Switch 2, like Nonaga's Ambition Awakening Complete Edition, already support traditional plugged-in mice. So this offers an alternative.
So you detach both Joy-Cons and use them like pointers. How accurate is that? Is it like a Wii remote?
Sort of, but maybe better. Early testing was surprisingly positive for basic use. Testers found the tracking to be quite slick, even on non-ideal surfaces like fabric. Someone tested it on their trousers.
Seriously? Okay.
It's not going to replace a high-precision esports mouse, and you do have to stretch your hand out a bit. But it works for navigating menus and even on the home screen. You can adjust sensitivity, too, with 3 levels.
They're also finally introducing a proper integrated game chat platform.
Yes, built into Nintendo Switch Online. This new game chat service offers voice chat, video chat, party chat, screen sharing, and even game sharing functionality.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. It's free for the first year, but after that, it will require an NSO subscription.
And there's a bit of a hurdle to get into it initially. Something about SMS.
There's a one-time authentication step via text message, SMS. Yeah, there was a note in the sources about needing a phone with SMS capabilities by June 5th for access.
Right.
Though that seems a bit redundant if you don't have SMS. You likely weren't planning on using a mobile authenticated chat feature anyways, probably just standard security setup.
Within that game chat, one feature sounds incredibly useful, especially for accessibility. Live speech-to-text transcription.
This is fantastic. It takes the voice chat and transcribes it onto the screen in real time, like closed captions on a live stream, even parsing it by individual speakers.
That's huge.
It's a huge win for accessibility, of course, but also genuinely helpful for players who find it hard to concentrate on voice chat while intensely focused on gameplay.
Totally. And a useful feature returning from the original Switch. That hopefully uses the new Rumble well. Find your controllers.
The Find Your Lost Controllers feature is back.
Yeah.
Using the new HD Rumble 2 motors, you can make paired Joy-Con 2s or the Switch 2 Pro controller vibrate loudly,
Nice.
making it easier to locate them if they've fallen down the side of the sofa.
Always useful. Okay, let's talk about how the games themselves are packaged and updated. The physical game cases are changing.
Yes, they're now Nintendo Red, which is fine. Some regions have wraparound cover art, which is nice. But the big design element everyone's noticed is the top banner. Instead of the small logo, it's a thick, solid red banner across the entire top of the case, with a relatively small, centered Switch 2 logo inside it. If it's an upgraded Switch 2 version of a Switch 1 game, there's also a large block of text and a QR code at the bottom explaining the upgrade. The consensus in the sources, visually, they are not pretty.
That sounds like a strange design choice. And there's this new game key card option for third parties. What's that about?
This has definitely been controversial among physical game collectors, with game sizes growing and the larger 64 GB cartridges being expensive to produce.
Right.
Nintendo is offering third parties the option of a game key card. It looks like a standard Switch cartridge, but when you insert it, it doesn't contain the full game data. Instead, it acts as a license key and triggers a full download of the game onto the system's internal memory.
So you buy a physical box, but you still need to download the entire game. That kind of defeats the purpose for some people.
It does for those who value physical media for preservation or bypassing large downloads. However, Nintendo has explicitly promised that none of its own first-party games will use these key cards.
Okay, that's important.
They will always come on proper Switch 2 cartridges. This is helped by the fact that Nintendo's own game file sizes are typically much smaller than many large third-party AAA titles.
That's good news for fans of Nintendo's own games. What about upgrading your existing Switch 1 games for the new hardware? Is it similar to PlayStation's upgrades?
Yes, it mirrors the PS4 to PS5 upgrade path quite a bit. There will be paid Switch 2 editions for some games, likely offering significant enhancements and potentially extra content.
Like a $10 upgrade or something?
Probably something like that, yeah. Similar to a PS5 upgrade fee. But Nintendo is also offering free Switch 2 upgrades for a selection of Switch 1 games.
Are these free upgrades just for smaller indie titles? Or are we talking big names?
Surprisingly, no, not just smaller games. While games like ARMS and Captain Toad Treasure Tracker are getting free upgrades, so are major popular first-party titles.
Like?
Reports specifically mention Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario 3D World, plus Bowser's Fury, and even Pokemon Scarlet and Violet receiving free upgrades for Switch 2.
Pokemon Scarlet and Violet getting a free performance upgrade. Wow, that alone might justify the purchase for some players.
One can hope it smooths things out. Specifically for Link's Awakening Remake and Echoes of Wisdom, the free upgrades add higher resolution and HDR support.
Nice.
Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, meanwhile, are expected to get extensive Switch 2 editions, implying paid upgrades that will likely offer significantly higher resolution, potentially locked 60Ps, and perhaps other features.
Okay, extensive sounds promising. What about backwards compatibility in general? Can you just put your old Switch games in, and do they automatically perform better?
Yes, original Switch games appear to run fine on the Switch 2 hardware. You can also transfer your save data from your old Switch, which is reportedly a quick and easy process via system settings, taking only a few minutes.
Good.
However, early testing indicates that those free upgrades for Switch 1 games don't necessarily mean a resolution bump in handheld mode for games that were previously 720p handheld 1080p docked.
Oh, okay. So if a game like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was 720p handheld on the original, on the Switch 2's bigger 1080p screen, it might still be rendering at 720p and just stretching it.
That seems to be what initial reports suggest for games without specific Switch 2 edition upgrades, which means on the larger, higher resolution screen, those older games that ran at 720p natively in handheld could look a bit blurrier when stretched compared to how they looked on the original Switch OLED's 720p panel.
That's a slight disappointment if you were hoping your entire existing library would suddenly look pin-sharp and handheld. But save transfer is definitely a win.
Absolutely. Being able to bring your library forward is crucial.
Let's talk about the device itself, the design, build, and how it feels to carry around.
Physically, it's a bit taller than the Switch OLED, but maintains the same thickness at about 0.55 inches. The material finish is different, though a matte texture on the console and Joy-Cons, it feels much more premium and less plasticky than the original. It feels good in the hands.
Is it noticeably heavier? I heard it was.
Yes, it's denser. It weighs 535 grams compared to the Switch OLED's 420 grams.
Okay.
But testers noted that while you feel the difference side by side, it wasn't so heavy as to be noticeably straining during gameplay. It feels more substantial.
Any small quality-of-life build improvements people noticed?
The game card slot hinge is significantly improved. It's a much sturdier design with extra internal supports and a metallic plug, feeling far less flimsy than the original Switch's hinge.
Good. How about the dock? Any changes there?
The dock is chunkier than the OLED dock and has a detachable back panel for cable management, which is nice for routing wires.
Ah, okay.
Though reports mention that getting that detachable panel back on can be quite fiddly, requiring careful alignment of multiple pegs. Also, the cooling fan visible inside the dock looks surprisingly small in early photos.
Did they fix that persistent issue with tabletop mode where using the bottom port put pressure on it? That always worried me.
Unfortunately, that design flaw from the original seems to have carried over. Propping the tablet up in tabletop mode while using the bottom USB-C port for accessories can still stress the board.
Oh, shame.
However, this is much less of a problem now because they've added a second USB-C port at the top, and Bluetooth audio is natively supported.
Ah.
This means you can use a headset or receiver plugged into the top port while charging from the bottom, or just use Bluetooth audio and leave the bottom port clear in tabletop mode.
That top USB-C port sounds like a simple but key improvement for usability.
It's a great quality of life add, definitely.
Compared to something like a ROG Ally, how does the Switch 2 stack up purely on portability? Is it still king there?
Well, despite being heavier than the OLED, the Switch 2 is still noticeably lighter and slimmer than handheld PCs, like the Asus ROG Ally and Ally X.
Okay.
The Switch 2 is 535G, or 1.18 pounds, compared to the Ally's around 608G and the Ally X is almost 680G. It maintains that true grab-and-go portability in a way that traditional home consoles, even compact ones like the Series S, just can't. They still need a screen and power source.
Speaking of grab-and-go, battery life is always a concern. How does it compare? I heard it might be shorter.
The battery itself in the Switch 2 is 5,220 mAh, about 19.3 watt-hours, which is actually smaller than batteries found in PC handhelds like the ROG Ally's 40 watt-hours or the new Ally X's massive 80.
Right.
And its maximum runtime, quoted at 2 to 6.5 hours, is shorter than the Switch OLED's 4.5 to 9 hours.
Okay, so smaller battery than PC handhelds and shorter max runtime than the OLED. That sounds like a step backward in portability in one key area.
On paper, maybe. But here's where the optimization comes in again. While the battery is smaller than PC handhelds, the actual runtime you get in demanding games often compares favorably, sometimes even beating them.
Really?
Nintendo's system and games are heavily optimized. The software is built specifically for this hardware. Reports noted that running Cyberpunk 2077 for about 40 minutes only drained the battery by 33%,
Okay.
suggesting around 10 hours of runtime for that demanding title. Compare that to the less optimized PC handhelds where, in side-by-side tests, the Ally reportedly died in about 1.5 hours running the same game.
Huh. So the smaller battery might last less time overall doing simple tasks than an OLED, but when you're pushing demanding AAA games, Nintendo's optimization magic makes that battery last surprisingly well compared to the PC competition.
Exactly. It's the trade-off for the increased power and the new display. You lose a bit of that incredible maximum longevity the OLED had, but you gain the ability to run more demanding games efficiently on the battery you have.
Got it. What about connections and ports besides the USB-C ports we mentioned? Anything else?
You still have the standard 3.5mm audio jack. Crucially, you have those two USB-C ports, one bottom, one top. And it supports both Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth.
That second USB-C port at the top, it sounds simple but genuinely useful. No more charger or headset dilemma.
It really is. It eliminates that awkward choice on the original Switch and OLED. Do I charge it, or do I plug in a USB-C accessory like a headset receiver in handheld mode? Now you can do both.
Okay, let's put it all together. How does the Switch 2 stack up against the competition you might be considering? First, against the Switch OLED. Big question for current owners.
The most obvious difference is price. The Switch 2 is $100 or $86 more at MSRP. But the OLED can often be found discounted, sometimes creating an even larger price gap, maybe $150 or $156 cheaper.
Right.
The Switch 2 is also heavier and taller with that nicer matte finish, but potentially less comfortable with smaller controls than PC handhelds, whereas the OLED is lighter and shorter, perhaps better ergonomically for smaller hands.
And the screens are very different, as we discussed.
Huge difference. Switch 2 has the larger 7.9-inch 1080p 120Hz LCD with HDR, a big leap in resolution and refresh rate over the OLED 7-inch 720p 60Hz panel.
Yeah.
But the OLED screen itself still has superior contrast, black levels, and color vibrancy, even if the Switch 2 has good color reproduction, despite some early HDR issues.
Battery life definitely favors the OLED, at least the maximum runtime.
That's right. The OLED's more efficient display and less power-hungry chip give it that longer 4.59-hour window compared to the Switch 2's 6.5 hours.
What about the controllers and features? Summarize those differences.
Switch 2 gets the magnetic Joy-Cons, the upgraded HD Rumble 2, and the unique mouse controls. The OLED has the standard rail attachment and original HD Rumble.
Okay.
Switch 2 also has the double USB-C ports. And the big one, Switch 2 offers backward compatibility, performance boosts, and specific free paid upgrades for many Switch 1 games, while the OLED only plays original Switch games as they were.
So the Switch 2 is technically superior in performance, screen resolution refresh rate HDR, controller features, and connectivity. But the OLED is cheaper, has better battery life for less demanding games, and a display with superior contrast.
Your choice really comes down to budget and what you prioritize. The latest games and features, higher handheld resolution, and potential upgrades.
Right.
Versus saving money, prioritizing maximum battery life and OLED contrast, and focusing on the existing Switch library.
How about against PC handhelds, like the Asus ROG Ally? That's a popular comparison.
Price-wise, the Switch 2's MSRP is cheaper. However, the standard ROG Ally Z1E has been discounted to the same price point as the Switch 2's launch price, while the new Ally X remains significantly more expensive.
Portability.
In terms of portability, the Switch 2 is generally lighter and slimmer, making it feel more truly portable.
And comfort. How do they feel to hold?
PC handhelds like the Ally usually win here, with their full-size controls, chunkier grips, often more precise sticks and D-pads, and inclusion of back paddles. The Switch 2's narrower Joy-Cons, even with a taller design, can still lead to hand cramps for some during long, traditional gaming sessions compared to the ergonomic designs of the Ally.
Display comparison. Both are 1080p 120Hz LCDs, right? So pretty similar.
Just same core specs there. The Switch 2 has a slightly larger 7.9-inch screen compared to the Ally's 7-inch, and the Switch 2 adds HDR support, which the Ally lacks.
Ah, HDR is a difference.
Yeah, the Ally's screen is slightly brighter at 500 nits, versus the Switch 2's reported around 400 nits. While the Ally can sometimes look crisper due to less reliance on upscaling, the Switch 2's color pop can be better, especially with HDR off. The Ally also has chunkier bezels.
Battery life is counterintuitive given the battery sizes, as you said.
That's the key insight here. While the Ally has a larger battery, the Switch 2 often gets comparable or better runtime in demanding games because Nintendo's software and games are heavily optimized for their specific hardware. PC handhelds are running a wide range of software that isn't specifically built for that chip and power envelope, leading to less efficiency and faster drain, particularly without being plugged in.
Unless you splash out for the Ally X.
Exactly. The Ally X, with its huge 80-watt-hour battery, is the exception, offering the longest runtime of any of these devices.
Controller features are vastly different, obviously.
Completely. The Switch 2 has the unique detachable magnetic Joy-Cons with HD Rumble 2 and mouse controls, enabling couch co-op and different interaction types easily.
Yeah.
The Ally has fixed, standard controls with standard rumble, but they often feel more precise for traditional controller inputs, plus you get back paddles. You can also plug in a mouse to the Ally.
And the game libraries are the ultimate divergence point, surely.
This is usually the deciding factor for most people. The Switch 2 is the only place you can play Nintendo's first-party exclusives. Your Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, the next Zelda, etc.
The essentials for many.
Right. Plus, it gets access to the growing list of third-party AAA titles it can now handle, and backward compatibility. The Ally, being a PC, gives you access to virtually any game library from Steam, Epic, Xbox, Game Pass, etc., a vastly wider range of third-party PC-specific and older titles. Although getting AAA games to run well on the Ally often requires tweaking settings.
So the Switch 2 is for the smoother, it just works console experience, Nintendo exclusives, and easy local multiplayer unique input methods. The Ally is for maximum library access, traditional PC-style controls, and the willingness to tinker with settings.
And the Ally X is the premium PC handheld option for those who need that PC library and want the longest possible battery life in handheld mode, price be damned.
Finally, how does the Switch 2 compare to traditional home consoles, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series XS? Seems like a different category, but people will ask.
In terms of raw power, there's no contest. PS5 and Series X are significantly more powerful. They target native 4K resolution at 60, 120 Hz, while the Switch 2 relies on DLSS to reach up to 4K at 60 Hz when docked in supported games. The Series S sits somewhere in between, typically targeting 1440p at up to 120 Hz. Storage is also much smaller on the Switch 2, 256 GB versus the Series S's 512 GB or 1 TB. Though physical games and Nintendo's smaller file sizes mitigate that somewhat.
And software ecosystems.
Yeah.
Apps and stuff.
Historically, PlayStation and Xbox have much broader support for streaming apps, social features, web browsers, etc. The Switch 2's new Game Chat adds significant social features within the gaming context, but it's not the full multimedia hub experience of the other consoles.
But the fundamental difference is just how you use them, right? Portability.
Absolutely. The Switch 2 is designed as a hybrid portable first, dockable to a TV second. The PS5 and Xbox Series XS are home consoles through and through, designed to live under your TV.
No taking your PS5 on the bus.
Exactly. While the Series S is compact, it still needs an external screen and power outlet, unlike the Switch 2, which can play anywhere.
And yet again, it comes down to games. Always games.
For sure. If Nintendo's first-party exclusives are essential to you, those specific experiences you can only get from Nintendo the Switch 2 is non-negotiable.
Right.
PS5 and Xbox get the vast majority of major third-party AAA releases and their own studio exclusives. Some Microsoft games are starting to appear on Switch 2, blurring the line slightly.
True.
But if you want the highest fidelity versions of multi-platform games and the big Sony Microsoft exclusives, PS5 Series X offer vastly more raw power.
So you're picking between Nintendo's unique game experiences and the hybrid playstyle on one hand versus maximum raw power and a broader library of traditional AAA games and exclusives on the other.
That's the core decision point, really.
Just a couple other things from the sources before we finish. Nintendo mentioned the price. It might go up in the future, is that right?
Yes, they did note that the price very well might increase down the line, citing potential factors like tariffs. So, if you're interested, getting one sooner rather than later could save you money. While the console's launch price didn't change from initial reports despite some complaints, accessories did see a small bump, around $5–10.
And ordering directly from Nintendo doesn't guarantee launch day delivery. That seems odd.
Correct. They stated that due to shipping logistics outside their direct control, ordering from Nintendo's online store doesn't come with a guarantee of arrival on launch day, something to keep in mind if immediate gratification is key for you.
Good to know. Finally, ending on an exciting note, there are strong signals about a major Nintendo Direct presentation coming soon.
Very strong signals from credible insiders. The expectation is a major Nintendo Direct is imminent, likely within the first 2 weeks of June, either launch week or the week immediately after.
Oh, wow, okay.
This is given extra weight by Nintendo partnering with Summer Games Fest for the first time, suggesting they have things to show around that time frame. It means potentially significant new game announcements for the Switch 2 could be right around the corner, just as people are getting used to the hardware.
That's perfect timing. Just as we're absorbing all this hardware info, the game lineup could expand even further.
It seems like it's planned that way.
So, to wrap it all up for you, the listener, the Nintendo Switch 2 isn't a radical reinvention, but it is a substantial evolution. You're getting significantly more power, a much improved handheld display in terms of size, resolution, refresh rate, and HDR.
Yeah.
Alongside smart features in the controllers like mouse capabilities and enhanced HD rumble.
It's positioned to successfully bring more demanding third-party AAA titles to Nintendo's platform, crucial for its longevity, while absolutely retaining the core identity of a portable hybrid with access to Nintendo's unique and beloved game library.
Hopefully this deep dive gives you a really clear picture of what the Switch 2 is, how it holds its own against the Switch OLED, those PC handhelds, and the big home consoles, helping you figure out if and when the time is right for you to jump in.
What's fascinating here, building on Nintendo's strategy, is how this beefed-up hybrid, leading on AI upscaling rather than brute force, might influence the broader console market. Will we see others attempt this blended portable home approach, optimized hardware tackling demanding games in novel ways? Or will the industry remain strictly segmented by teraflop counts?
And looking internally, what do features like true handheld mouse control or a fully integrated game chat open up for developers and players? Does this pave the way for different game genres, different ways of interacting and connecting that go beyond what we've traditionally seen on Nintendo hardware? Something to ponder as we see the Switch 2 ecosystem develop.
Indeed. Lots to think about.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Nintendo Switch 2. We'll catch you on the next one.